Here tonight. Thank you for giving of your time and giving of your attention and coming together and really getting another look and feel for what Wilson is about. You know, I chose Wilson 19 years ago, and I always have known that it's the right decision. Every day I come to work, and the educators who I'm surrounded by stretch me. They challenge each other. They work so well together. And I know that I'm a part of something that is successful because we work and collaborate so hard together. You know, fulfilling our mission of preparing our students for success, it takes a lot. It takes belief, it takes vision, it takes dedication, it takes persistence, and I would argue it also takes longevity because, you know, Wilson is structured in a way that's kind of unique. I'm only the sixth head in 105 years. That stability answers the question of, can we fulfill our direction? Our faculty have an average tenure of over 16 years at Wilson. And you know, that's about working hard, not about settling in. So I'm very thrilled about that. And because Wilson educators settle for nothing less than excellence, we deliver on a lot of outcomes. You know, we're not everything to all people. If you have an aspiring alpine skier, I have a great school in Colorado who I can refer you to. We're not everything to everyone, but we do accomplish a lot together. And we do that because we have a vision and we have a dedication to prepare our students for success. And so in doing that, what we hear a lot is, you know, what are you known for? Well, we do prepare our students well. But I would argue we're known because our students are known. Our students are not only known here so that we can provide the best education, they're known when they go on to their next step. They're known as unique people because our school size allows each student to bring their diversity to our community and they can feel respected and appreciated. They're known for their talent because the learning activities that we provide and the projects that they encounter and that they engage with not only rehearse the mastery of education, but allow the creativity and the collaboration that they can shine through. They're known to seek equity. As mentioned, our students talk about identity, and then that transitions to social justice. And they're engaged in work and attention where they can gain their voice, they can give their opinions, they can work together, and they can create a better community. We see that happen. They're known to be poised. Their self-confidence is not an arrogance. It's engaging. They are people you want to be around. They're known to work. See, our students develop their organizational skills and their work ethic so that when they leave us, they're prepared for any challenge that's presented to them. They're known to overachieve. Knowing that you don't have to be, as an educator, harsh or soft. Instead, you can be supportive. And when you're supportive and passionate about what you do, that translates to what the students are working on and accomplishing. And what happens is they're motivated to do well. Our students are known to be academically advanced and curious. Having a leg up does not happen because we have a pressurized environment. Having a leg up happens because we have the customization to reach each student, stretch them, challenge them, support them, and have them work so that they achieve without internalizing stress. Being known for having an edge. You see, our students, when they finish a Wilson education, secondary schools embrace them as part of their community. On their own merit and on their own work, they become contributing members to another school. And it's very wonderful to see that happen. And certainly, we hope that your child is going to be known at Wilson as well, which is one of the reasons you're here tonight. And of course, I'm going to believe all of these things, but it would really be helpful to you, I think, if you were able to hear from a couple people in our community. So first, I'm going to introduce a Wilson graduate. She's from the class of 2012. She's now a senior at John Burroughs High School. She is a 4-year letter winner and starter in field hockey, basketball, and lacrosse. She's also a captain in field hockey and basketball. She's the editor-in-chief of the school newspaper. She achieved the state recognition at the Science Olympiad. She is the member of the Executive Board of Diversity there, as well as leading the Montgomery Plan Community Service Project. She's graduating from John Burroughs with not only as an AP scholar, but as a National Merit finalist. Her choices or her options for her next step in her education were many and very, very impressive. She was recruited not only academically, but athletically. And what she has decided to do is play basketball at the University of Chicago. So I am thrilled that when Allison is playing WashU, at least one time each year, I'll be able to see that happen. So please welcome Allison Gill.
Well, that introduction certainly made me sound busier than I feel. Thank you, though, for the invitation to speak here today, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I hope that I can live up to it. So a few weeks ago, I turned 18, and as many of you may understand, once I became officially super old, I began to reflect on my foregone childhood. So, in my wise, some may even call it enlightened adulthood, I've naturally been thinking a lot about my time here. Wilson played and continues to play a significant role in my life, not just because of longevity, though I did spend 8 years here, but because the lessons I learned at Wilson continue to apply to my life today. I wrote in one of my essays to the University of Chicago that almost everything in life, everything we do or value or aspire for, that all of that could probably be traced back to kindergarten. Well, I'd expand that more generally to elementary school now. I believe that. Take, for instance, the idea of making your mark a good one. My Mago was a concept that I internalized in JK and have hopefully lived out ever since. At the risk of sounding overdramatic, almost every endeavor I've undertaken and every success I've enjoyed at Burroughs, in and out of the classroom, could in some way be connected back to Wilson. First off, the academic piece. The foundation of my experience at Wilson was the ability to self-direct my learning. My teachers provided me with the space to follow my interest, fostering intellectual curiosity. And because of that, I graduated with knowledge that I felt passionate about and ranged from the Z-axis and Nordic gods to the state of Maine. But Wilson coupled that self-direction with a strong basis in the academic fundamentals: grammar, polynomials, American history. I think that the best example of this partnership is letter essays. Most schools have book reports, but Wilson has letter essays. Every student in 5th grade would read a book of their choosing and then write a letter to Mrs. Finkenkeller about the book. We would need to summarize in one paragraph and then analyze the text in the other parts. But because of the letter format, we were able to incorporate our own unique voice into the analysis. Now, I'm a pretty ferocious reader. Over one summer in elementary school, we had a teacher challenge our entire class to read 100 books in exchange for a pizza party. That summer, I personally finished 31 books to make sure we'd get there. So, I have read a lot of books. Yet, I most distinctly remember Mrs. Finkenkeller excitingly shoving Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 into my hands and imploring me to read it. And honestly, reading and writing about that book was transformative. It was the first time that I read something that I knew was important, and that I first grasped the power of language in those pages. Then, when I sat down to write about it, I realized that I too possessed the power of language, and that I could grapple with these big ideas and big themes in life with my own words. Reading and writing well are the single most important skills to have in further education. Every single aspect of secondary school somehow depends on the ability to process information and then to summarize and expound on it. I was fortunate enough to first be exposed to good writing practices while at Wilson with Mrs. Finkenkeller. So I entered Burroughs with a thorough grasp on analytical writing and an inkling of voice, and this competency has freed me to develop a stronger voice and challenge myself as a writer and a thinker. But Wilson is not just a place to grow as a student. It's a place where I learned how to exist in a community and how to be a leader. Wilson is a purposeful place where every single aspect of the curriculum is intended to somehow better its students. Now that I'm 6 years removed, I realize that even the projects that were just fun at the time were really intended to teach in a different way. I'm sure that many of you have heard about the Wagons West unit in 3rd grade. For those who haven't, it's a simulation in which the entire 3rd grade class pretends to be a pioneer heading west on the Oregon Trail. Each third grader is given some background, a family, and a wagon group. And the student purchases supplies on a budget, writes letters from the trail, and strategizes on how to get west among the other objectives. It's a fairly intensive and comprehensive unit, but when I was in third grade, it was just plain fun. I was selected as the leader of my wagon group. I was very proud of this, and needless to say, I enjoyed being in charge. Being the leader meant that I got to dictate the final supplies and decide who scouted ahead and all of the fun things that come with being in charge. But it also came with a price. 3 times a week, instead of going out to recess, I had to stay in the classroom and do calculations to figure out how far we could advance on the trail. Today, missing those 10 minutes of recess doesn't sound like much, but in third grades, it was really quite the sacrifice. I learned that any leadership requires sacrifices and a lot of work, but I also learned that leadership can be well worth the added effort. Ever since my first sojourn as a leader in Wagons West, I've been a leader in a variety of outlets: editor of the newspaper, captain of multiple sports teams, student government, coaching, science Olympiad, community service. All of this has required a lot more pressure and a lot more time, but I learned way back in Wagons West that leadership is a rewarding and demanding effort. Additionally, Wagons West taught me about risks. Risks are imperative for any success, but as is their very nature, risks can be frightening to take. I took a huge risk in even attempting to be recruited to play college basketball, and I'm taking an even larger one next year by trying to actually play college basketball. I have a penchant for taking risks in the classroom, as my current teachers could attest to, and many have. I'm sure my English teacher from last year would happily tell you about the time that I turned in a blank sheet of paper for an assignment, but that's a story for another time. I will digress, though, and tell you that I did get an A on that one. Clearly, I like to put myself out there and see what can happen. So you might be wondering how this pertains to Wagons West. Oftentimes, we were faced with the choice between choosing a shorter, riskier path or a longer path. And naturally, I always took the shorter and riskier path rather than going the safe route. Sometimes we would enjoy the fruits of this riskier route since we jump out into a substantial lead. This was very important to me as I'm a very competitive person, and I was dead set that my wagon group would get out to California first. Other times, though, we suffered from the choices. I certainly suffered as my fictional eldest son, Edward, died of a snake bite and my husband fell ill with tuberculosis. From Wagons West, I got a clearer understanding of risk-taking, and while I wouldn't necessarily sacrifice the lives of my husband and son in real life, I did leave the unit with a greater willingness to take risks. I know I've said it earlier, but it bears repeating. I credit so much of who I am and what I do today to my time spent at Wilson. I'm grateful that I could pursue my passions and take risks in such a safe and welcoming environment like this. There are so many opportunities at Wilson, and clearly the school has meant a lot to me and my family. I hope that you too will give your child the same experience that I had and choose Wilson. Thank you.
Allison, thank you. That's wonderful. I knew that as part of the introduction, I didn't have to tell you how impressive she was. I knew I didn't have to tell you what a great person who she is and has become and will always be. So thank you, Allison. We appreciate it very, very much. Also in our community, we have a lot of folks who are even older than 18-year-old Allison. And whereas I probably still trump his age, I'm going to introduce an adult who has a lot of experience with Wilson. So Andrew Rubin is an amazing champion of the school. We're fortunate that his third child is in 5th grade now. His children have done amazingly well, not only in secondary school, but at the university level. They have a great insight as to what Wilson is about. Andrew himself personally has given a lot to the school. He's not only been a parent, but a board member and board president. Probably one of the things that you could relate to is he actually has eclipsed 25 tuitions paid for the Wilson School. That's commitment. So, Mr. Andrew Rubin, please welcome Andrew.
Welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and like Allison, I'm so glad that you are and that you're considering Wilson. I'm not so sure about that setup because there were a couple points in there, but I do think that my wife and I currently hold the record for the longest continuous attendance at Wilson. We're in our 18th year. We've sent Sam through, who's now 23 and a senior at Washington University. Our middle child is 17. and on her third high school at Crossroads, and we can talk about that for a second too. And then I have Emily, who's in 5th grade, and so we're gonna hit 19 years next year, but I think it does, what I'd like to offer you tonight, and it's not that much, but what I'd like to offer you is the perspective of someone who has seen this school perform for that long, and for 3 children who are, like your children, in some ways similar, but in many ways really, really different, and see it succeed for all 3 of my children. And I would just say to the side that Allison is truly exceptional, but what I think is equally interesting is that she's not unique, and she is in many ways representative of the kinds of students that graduate from Wilson. And I say that I've seen, I'm not talking about my own kids now, but I've seen an awful lot of kids graduate with those wonderful 6th grade graduations. And Wilson has a very unique, in my experience, ability and a success rate for taking diverse, interesting, unique young children and turning them into diverse, interesting, unique, slightly older children with just an exceptional level of maturity and foundation. And so I just wanted to speak for just a minute about how that's played out for my own children, because this is the foundation of their education and their life. And I should just say, I'm a lawyer and a professional cellist, and my wife is a law professor, and she's a singer and a linguist, and we're both public school products. I mean, we had 1 year of independent school between the 2 of us, and then public universities, and so it was almost a crisis of philosophy to take a leap into the independent system. I mean, it goes against the grain. We're in U City. There's a part of us that still feel guilty every year, but we did it, a slight bit of selfishness perhaps for our children, but because we looked at Wilson and said, there's something really special here and really worth taking advantage of. And I guess the point I want to make then is that, with 3 kids, and everybody's different, and they're all performing at different levels, and not everyone's making it to the basketball team on University of Chicago. But this concept of this balance between traditional classical education and innovation is real. And I've seen it because I've got my 3rd child who's now in 5th grade, and she's a yeller when it comes to math, and it's painful. Every night she screams, and she's really good at math. She's in the advanced math program, but boy, Angela Zinkel just keeps pounding away on the basics. I mean, and that's good for Emily, because I don't think she's going to end up in math someday, but they're just, that kind of discipline and dedication to the essentials. And that covers through languages, through music, through mathematics and the science, and focusing on weaknesses as well as strengths, or filling in areas that can be developed. And then you layer on top of that these extraordinary pedagogical techniques, experiences, things that the Excellence Program has been able to do, the civil rights trips, things that really make Wilson unique and are pushing the envelope in technology. And you marry that together, and it's been an amazing foundation. I'll tell you one anecdote about my middle child. My wife's a Francophone, and she took a distinguished Fulbright in Paris, and she took the 2 older kids, and I stayed home with the younger kid, and Layla was fluent, but the kids weren't. And Kira, who was in 4th grade, probably knew 5% of the French that she needed. I mean, she'd had French here at Wilson, but her organizational skills, her note-taking skills from Mr. Hinkebine and from the other teachers that she'd had up through 3rd grade, she sat there in the back of this public school in Paris and took notes in French that she didn't understand, then she'd go home and work on it, and 4 months later she's speaking conversationally fluent. And I'll never forget, in May of that year, my wife calls me and said, I'm so excited, Kira's been promoted to the 5th grade. And I was like, what are you talking about? She said, you don't understand. 12 of her classmates got held back because it's a big gap year in Paris. And it was that foundation that she'd gotten, and the study skills and the organizational skills and the maturity that we threw her into the deep end, and she rose, and that was 100% of Wilson. And the last thing I'll say is that I was telling Thad earlier today, I think Wilson, you see that success when things are good, but you also see it when there are challenges. My son has had difficulty in college, as some do, with anxiety, with depression, and his friend network, his social connections from Wilson and from Burroughs, and his maturity and his academic standing kept him going through rocky times when, if he'd had weaknesses in those areas, things could have been really difficult. And so I got to see him and the kind of maturity that he had and the foundation of academic skills carry him through a difficult part of his life that would otherwise have been really scary for us. It was scary enough as parents, but it would have been really scary. So all I can say at this point, and you almost used the word old, but I'm older than many of you, and it does make me feel old. The only thing I could say is, again, back to the longevity and the tradition, is half the faculty member might recognize from our first year, and that's an amazing thing. But I have simply seen Wilson work. I've seen them deliver on the promise. It has kept us coming back every year. I've seen so many of our colleagues just continue to reinvest in the school, because at the end of the day, it is about results. And when Thad said it's not for everybody, that's true, but I've seen it work for almost everybody and for all kinds of children, certainly for my 3 very different children. So I'm really excited for you at the beginning. A few of you have older kids, but for many of you at the beginning of this journey, it's an exceptional, exceptional opportunity, and I hope you grab it. My elevator pitch to people when I meet them is that, having spent an ungodly amount of money over the years, there is zero question in my mind whether it's worth it. The only question is it the right fit for your child and the right fit for your family. But take it from me that there is no doubt that this school is everything it claims to be and is really exceptional itself. So thanks so much for coming. Appreciate it.
Hello again. And I want to commend you parents, and I forgot to say this in the beginning, but you guys have been through a huge journey. Many of you with your first child going through this process for the first time, and you should be commended for all the time, effort, maybe sleepless nights, I don't know. If you don't pick Wilson, there'll be more of those, but anyway. But I just want to say, really, in all seriousness, you have done so much work. It's been such a pleasure getting to know you. I hope the road continues for you with Wilson. And at this time, I'd love to thank Allison and Andrew and Thad, but invite you to, there are many more folks here like them who are really eager to talk with you and have a little fun too. And we hope you join us, and we wish you all the best with your decision. And remember, there's only one right decision. But thank you so much for coming, and despite opening night at the Cardinals game, which you may be missing, so thank you. Thank you again.